Welcome in TNC Radio.live. This is Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. I'm Tom Kelly. Tonight, we're going to be taking on the letter I in the acronym FORGIVE. Dr. Cortman has been a practicing psychologist for a number of years, done about 7,000, 7,500 hours? I've lost count now. What's the number?
Somewhere between 75,000 and 80,000 hours of therapy.
Yes.
And that's just this week.
Yeah, that was just this week. And that doesn't include the therapy that he goes through for himself. So,
not at all.
Yeah. So, we're awfully happy to have Dr. Chris with us. He works us through a number of different things. We've been going through the acronym FORGIVE for the last few weeks, and we've got a few weeks to go yet. And tonight... we're going to get to why don't you recap where we've been before we get into what we're doing tonight?
I think that would always be a great way to start. By way of summary, we can talk about the word forgive as an acronym. There are 7 letters in the word forgive, and each one stands for some type of a word that represents a directive of some type that we know from evidence-based research is linked with well-being / happiness and longevity. So just by practicing these 7 items, people usually are feeling better than they would otherwise, and they live longer. And the first one, as we noted, the F word is forgive. We have just an abundance of research that talks about the real key in healing emotionally from pretty much anything is letting go. And letting go is probably as good a definition for forgive as there is. I recall a woman, 82 years old, said to me in a session, she said, "So doctor, what I hear you saying is that you want me to let go of everything that makes my head crazy." And I said, "That's brilliant." I stood up, I went over to my desk, and I wrote that down and said, "That's the best definition of forgiveness I think I've heard." So
I like it. Yeah.
It came from, I got to let go of everything that makes my head crazy. And when you think about letting go, as I have quite a bit, because I really do see it as the common denominator of all emotional healing. It's necessary when people are depressed. They have to let go of some things they're holding on to that bring them down or suck away their hope. When people have anxiety disorders, very often they have to let go of a fear and face something specifically. When there's grief, needless to say, we have to let go of someone. We have to say goodbye to that dog or that grandmother or that girlfriend or whoever it is that has left that's abandoned our lives. Whether it's trauma, we have to let go of the trauma. And very often we need to face the trauma first and process it, feel, express, and release. But release is another word for letting go. So my point here is that to heal from just about anything, we have to forgive or let go. The O word is optimism. And several weeks back, I was able to share research study after study after study that basically says when you think optimistically, that is, when you believe that, all things work together for good, or that ultimately things will end up in a good place, or that there's meaning to difficulties and frustration and suffering, that there's a plan for your life or a purpose for your life or direction for your life, that things ultimately are for good. If you believe that, whether or not it's true, there's all kinds of benefits, and the benefits are astounding because they're not just about being happier. They're also about living longer. They're about having better outcomes with cancer and better outcomes with pregnancy and having less likely chance for heart disease and stroke and anxiety disorders. And it just goes on, just because people have an explanatory style, right? Where they explain the world to themselves in a positive way. So that was the O word. Then we did the R word, Tom, and the R word is relationships. And again, just a preponderance of research that says friendships are amazingly important. And they have so much to do with our well-being and happiness all the way through life. And they can be a predictor, by having, friendships as a child. By fifth grade, it's a predictor of being less depressed, according to some research. You're less likely to have a clinical depression if you have your buddies, early on in life. And then we have research on the other end of life. I don't know if I mentioned this ever in the show, but we had a research study where they looked at old men, and they forced half of the men to join a group, a social group, a volunteer type group, and the other half not. And then 2 years later, they came back to find out the men that they had joined the social groups were statistically significantly more likely to be alive, only because of one thing. They had a place to go and people to connect with. They had friends. They had stuff to do. They had reason to keep going. And then there's the research on long-term relationships, meaning like marriages or long-term love relationships. And the research, again, is overwhelmingly positive. Married men. I know I mentioned this before. The research says married men do so much better than single men in terms of psychological well-being, physical well-being. They're less likely to drink to excess. They're less likely to smoke. They have what we call now a health coach in their wives who, kind of force them to watch what they eat and go to the doctor even when they don't want to go. That was a University of Texas study that demonstrated that one of the reasons married men live longer is because they got the wife there making them a little bit healthier. And that the fascinating study in all of that, I think, was that married men make more money. And when they get divorced, they make less money. And they make more money if they remarry. And nobody knows how to explain that, but there seems to be some correlation between, a happy, connected relationship with a spouse and success in all areas of life. So that's the R word. And then last week, we dove into the G word. And the G word is gratitude. And again, like optimism, it sounds like, yeah, that's nice. Be grateful. Say thank you. But it goes so much farther than that. When people are forced to be grateful, meaning they have to write down 3 things they're grateful for in a day, the research said it causes changes. It causes changes in the way they look at the world. There's actually biochemical changes in the brain. And again, things change. The blood pressure drops. There's better relationships at home. Again, there's more success at work. And then we have mental health and physical health that seems to improve just because somebody's now looking at the world in a grateful way. And again, these are not grateful people. These are normal people who are asked to start practicing gratitude. So those are the first 4 letters of the word forgive. And I know that you have nothing but really intelligent people listening to this show because they're listening to the show.
Right.
And so they know right away that the next letter is going to be I.
And we're going to tell them what that word is when we come back. Let's make them wait for it.
Oh, that's going to make sure that they listen.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a couple minutes right here on tncradio.live. Stay with us. We'll be right back with the letter I. It feels like Sesame Street. Today's episode brought to you by the letter I.
Brought to you by the letter I.
We'll be right back.
This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net for truck driving jobs for drivers under 21. So you just turned 18 and you're ready to find a job as a truck driver. But why is it so difficult? According to the United States federal law, a person must be 21 years old to drive a commercial vehicle in interstate commerce. Although you can obtain a CDL by the age of 18, you'll be limited to driving intrastate, and most trucking companies only hire drivers who are 21 years old or older. Also, insurance rates are much higher for trucking companies that employ drivers under the age of 21. But that doesn't mean there aren't truck driving jobs available before you turn 21. There are many jobs you can qualify for at just 18 years old. Although the majority of the truck driving jobs will be within your state lines, it's still a good idea to get your foot in the door and get a few years of experience before you turn 21. Under 21 Pilot Program. The FMCSA launched an Under 21 pilot program that helps Reserve and National Guard members ages 18, 19, and 20 explore civilian trucking careers. Commercial truck drivers are in high demand, and this program helps trucking companies hire disciplined and experienced drivers. For more information, visit www.fmcsa.gov/under21military-drivers-info. Towing and recovery. Driving a tow truck is typically an intrastate job. While there's no age restriction, besides being 18 years old, some companies may still require you to be 21. Check with some of your local towing companies and ask what the age requirements are. Local delivery driver. Working as a local delivery driver is a great way to gain experience in your trucking career. You could start working for a local store or warehouse and deliver goods right to a customer's door. Here are a few places you can look for local delivery jobs: furniture stores, lumber yards, office supply stores. Dump truck driver. Driving a dump truck may not be your dream job, but it gets your foot in the door, and you can work close to home. Most local businesses will need dump truck drivers to move building materials, dirt, garbage, or other freight. Most truck driving jobs won't become available until you're 21, but you don't have to wait until then to start gaining experience. Getting a few years of experience on your resume before applying for big trucking companies will help during the hiring process. This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
For the latest in traffic, weather, and information, catch the Morning Grind weekdays right here on tncradio.live.
Hope you're snapping along. Welcome back in tncradio.live. This is Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. I'm Tom Kelly. Dr. Chris, before we went to break, you reviewed the acronym FORGIVE and where we are so far. We're coming up to the I word. So this segment brought to you by the letter I, and today I stands for
Immature. No, not immaturity.
Yes. I thought so.
In my life, it does. Before I dive into the I, I forgot that I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Bob in Dallas, who's listening tonight. Bob is not a driver of any kind. He is now a newly retired anesthesiologist. And I always have appreciated Bob because he had the wisdom to only talk to patients when they were asleep. So Bob is listening tonight. You'll know him because he's probably the only Bob in Texas. And he's a nice guy.
Yeah, well, good. Well,
yeah. So
hello,
back to
Bob
I.
from tncradio.live.
So back to the letter I. You hear a lot, there is no I in team, but there is an I in forgive. And the I in this acronym is actually about the word investment. Now, why in the world would I be talking about investment when we're talking about, optimism and gratitude and forgiveness? Well, investment, as we all know, means you care about something. When you're invested in something, you are in. You are taken with whatever that is that matters to you, we most relate investments to finances, right? When you're invested in a particular stock, for instance, it matters to you how well that stock does. But we're not just invested in money and stocks and bonds. We're invested in family, and we're invested in friends, and we're definitely invested in our health, and we're invested in our sports teams, and we're invested in our hobbies. And sometimes we're invested in TV shows or TV stars or movie stars, or sometimes we can be invested in trends or social media. The definition really is whatever matters to you, you're invested in. And I like people to know that there's no psychological emotion unless there's investment. We can talk about, for instance, a Super Bowl party. If you've ever been to a Super Bowl party, Tom, there are essentially three groups of people. There are people rooting for the AFC champion. There are people rooting for the NFC champion. And then there are people who are there for the social world and the commercials. They could care less about what's going on in the Super Bowl. They're not invested. And then there'll be a play on the big screen, and you'll hear some people cheering wildly and other people groaning or yelling or dropping their faces in sadness and disgust. And the only people who will respond like that are the ones invested in the game. For that third group who are just there for the chips and the commercials and the camaraderie, there's no emotion on those plays because there's no investment in the game. They don't care about what happens on the field. We can only feel when we're invested. I can ask the audience, how many of you guys lost sleep over the race for mayor of Albuquerque? And unless you live in that town, the answer is nobody. Why? A chimpanzee could run for mayor and you guys wouldn't care. Why is that? No investment. There has to be some caring in order to cause feeling. Okay, so why is this I word in the word forgive? Because when there's investment in life, life has meaning. And all of the research says that when people believe that there's meaning in their lives, they're happier. They're better. They have better mental health. And without meaning, without purpose, without direction, when people feel lost or empty or aimless, it's very difficult to be happy. There is, according to the research, the well-being is compromised because there's no purpose. And Tom, this goes back to as long as man has been here on planet Earth, we've been looking to find purpose for our lives, meaning in our lives. And of course, we will never all agree on why we're here and what the purpose of our lives are. But according to the research, it less matters what you think life is about, and it more matters that you think there is meaning, that there is purpose. I have a patient now, Tom, who's 19 years old. And when I met him a few months ago, he said, I don't know why so many people are alive. I just don't understand why people don't just kill themselves, because I don't find any purpose in life. And I don't know what kind of purpose there is. And I explained to him very early on in our relationship that was one of our challenges, because he was going to need to find things to do that mattered, people to love, a direction in life, a purpose or purposes, things that he could invest in if he ever wanted to be a well person, to go from depressed and suicidal in his mindset to actually thriving. And it's exciting because we're probably 4 or 5 months down the road and he's already excited about going to school. He's excited about the fact that he has a number of hobbies that he likes. He's believing that he can have not only friends, but meaningful relationships in his life. He's actually looking forward to where his life could take him. And I'm excited for him because it seems to me that he's finding purpose. He's finding investment, things to believe in, things to do.
And that's all because he found a porpoise.
Yes. Yes, we all need a porpoise.
Kind of like Flipper. No. A purpose in life. And I've heard people say that kind of thing before, that, what's the meaning of things? And they take kind of this, life is without me. I don't know how you live like that. I really don't.
Well, the opposite of investment and purpose and meaning is meaninglessness. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to say at the end of a lifetime, well, what was that all about?
Yeah, sure.
Well, what was that for? Why did I work a zillion hours? What was that about?
Mm-hmm.
And, some of the greatest minds who've ever been here have put together, different theories on what we need, but they all seem to agree that we have to have some kind of meaning. I think it was Nietzsche who said something like, if you have a why, you could deal with a lot of different hows. Like your life could be really challenging, very difficult, but if there's a why to your life, if there's purpose for your life, you can go through the challenges of life.
Right.
And, Viktor Frankl, who is somebody that many people in my field respect because he wrote about meaning in life. He was actually a survivor of Nazi German concentration camps. And he would say that, they could take away our freedom and they could take away our stuff and they could take away everything, but they can't take our attitude from us. We get to choose what matters and what we believe in and how we're going to think about things. And he was real big on insisting that we all needed to have purpose and we all needed to find meaning in our lives. And so again, the research says there's a strong association between having meaning in your life and well-being. And the opposite is also true. If there's not meaning in your life, it's hard to be a well person.
So when we come back, I'm going to ask you the question, how does one begin that process of finding meaning in life? Especially when you're not 19, when you're 49 and you're wondering, what's this all for? It seems like to me that could be a difficult task.
Yeah, that sounds like a tough question. I may not return from this break.
Okay. Well, we'll check it out when we come back right here on TNCRadio.live. You're listening to Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. Stay right with us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Cortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. The great psychotherapist Maxie Maltzby once wrote that there are 5 ways, 5 criteria to assess whether our thoughts are rational or not. In his opinion, we only wanted to think rational thoughts. An irrational thought is actually something that's going to create emotional pain and get us in trouble in some way or another. So here they are, the 5 criteria for rational thinking. First, is my thought in line with objective reality? In other words, is it true or am I exaggerating and creating falsehoods? Secondly, is it likely to make me feel the way I want to feel? Again, is this a thought that promotes my mental health, or is it something that makes me feel frightened or anxious or resentful? Thirdly, is it problem solving? Rational thinking should solve problems, not create bigger ones. Number 4, is it in line with my long-term best interest? Rational thoughts are not only good for me in the here and now, but they help me in the long term. And again, gratitude, optimism, forgiveness. That promotes my long-term best interest. And finally, and this one doesn't always apply, but is this thought likely to get me in conflict with other people? If the answer to that one is yes, then it's usually not a rational thought. Try to get 5 out of 5 when you assess your thinking. And if you don't, change your thinking.
Don't miss Marcia Campbell, North America's trucking sweetheart, Thursdays at 6 p.m. on tncradio.live.
Welcome back, TNC Radio.live. I'm Tom Kelly along with Dr. Christopher Cortman. This is Building Strong Minds. Dr. Cortman, you were saying some very interesting things, I think, and I don't know what I would say to somebody who said to me, Tom, I cannot find any purpose in life. I'd be like, gosh, that sounds awful.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how.
And I appreciate your difficult question. It reminds me of the fact that Hunter Green, who is a pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, threw more 100-mile-per-hour pitches yesterday than anyone ever has in a game before.
That's correct.
And that's what I feel like you're doing here. You're throwing me the hard stuff, Tom. But I want to respond and say, what if someone did say to you, I don't have any meaning. I don't have any purpose in my life. The experts would probably say, let's point to existentialism, which says life may not have any inherent purpose, but then it's up to each person to figure out what their purpose or purposes are. It's a challenge. It's something that behooves every one of us, because my purpose or purposes might not work for you. So what we have to do is ask people what matters to you. And for some people, it's really quite simple. They'll say, my grandkids.
Right.
That means that, or their dog. Some people, their dog is the most important thing, person, cause that they have.
Sure.
But, most people have some things that really do matter to them. They would make a donation to help children, or they would spend time helping that elderly neighbor across the street who has a real hard time with her arthritis, bringing the groceries in. What is it that matters to you? What matters to you is what's going to lead to purpose. I think when we, those people in the audience who are people of faith, I remember a passage where somebody was talking to Jesus about the 10 Commandments, and he basically said, look, there's 2. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor. And I really appreciated that, because it's very simple, that if you can trust that there's any accuracy to that perception, to those words, what matters is going back to the gratitude, the love for God, but then what is God invested in? People. If there's a God and God is love and we're what he loves, then it's simple to find meaning. It's simple to find purpose and cause, because what are you doing to make a difference with people? And if you're one of these people who loves animals more than people, what are you doing to make a difference with animals? How are you helping children? How are you helping older folks, widows, orphans, prisoners? My God, I have a patient who has a son in prison, And she started sending some things to other guys in prison, and they just light up like Christmas trees, and they all send her letters of gratitude, and they want to hear from her. And nobody cares for the prisoners except their own families. I mean, we don't even think of them with a lot of regard or respect. But if that's an area that somehow touches your heart, wow, you can make a huge difference in a place where there's such a need for human connection, for love, for attention, for someone to believe in them, root for them, show caring about their lives and their the time before they are finally released. There's so much loneliness on this planet. There's so much need. You could take any one of our listeners, and if that person is willing to, you could touch lives all over the place. It's just a matter of how do you want to do that? What is it that's important to you? Do you want to get involved in a service club? Do you want to be somebody who donates time at the soup kitchen? Throwing slop on plates for people who aren't going to eat otherwise? I mean, there are so many ways to find purpose, to find meaning. Or maybe you're one of these people who are going to work on finding a cure for cancer or COVID, or you're going to be working on saving the planet from ourselves. I can't tell people how to find meaning. I can only say meaning is going to come from investment. And by caring about something, it provides meaning in our lives. And sometimes, Tom, in order to care, we have to be involved first and then care later. That's one of the psychological techniques. Give somebody something to do, and when they start doing that, they'll start caring about that. Right. That's one of the cool things about a service club. My service club, which is called Sertoma, Service to Mankind, it's about, the first thing we do is we have a clinic for speech impaired children. And I never cared about speech impaired children, but joining this club, that's the very first thing we do. So that matters. And we raise money and we help those kids. And it's like, I wouldn't even know those kids, but that's now a cause that I'm committed to.
Sure. So finding something to invest in, your time, your energy, your thinking, do that, and you'll start to find some meaning to the thing. There are an awful lot of people right now who waste time, I guess is the right way to say it, invested in not anything real. It's all online and in apps and those kinds of things, and they're really not doing anything for themselves or for others. And I think that catches up to people, don't you?
I do, because it's like junk food for the head.
Yeah.
There's only so much junk food you can have, and then it takes its toll.
Right.
On your body and on your mind.
And I think we see that, especially in younger people who are somehow attracted to and spend an awful lot of time, I'll just say it this way, picking on others. They're bullies online, and say things online that they would never, ever say, to somebody's face, for fear of being punched in the face if they did. But they get online and they just create havoc. I got to think people like that are not happy, invested people.
A psychologist that I attended a seminar, a guy named Dr. Sid Simon, talked about when you feel good, when a person feels good about himself or herself, two things are true. Number one is they don't do things to hurt themselves. And number two is they don't do things to hurt others. And that's one of the things I like to emphasize when I'm teaching my social black belt class is that when people are bullying, they're actually sending a message. And the message is, I'm not doing so well. I'm not so good with me. So I have a strong need to put down other people as a way to feel better about myself.
I see. That makes sense. It's sad, but it makes sense.
Yeah. There's another I word, and it's not ever going to be included in this particular acronym. And the I word is isolation. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that before, that loneliness and isolation has become a health risk. It's not just a sad thing for the person, the lonely, alone person to endure. We actually have heard studies like the Surgeon General saying you could lose as many as 15 years off your life by isolating. And it's pretty much the exact opposite of what I was sharing a couple of weeks back, that friendships, that human connection, that making a difference in the lives of others, that's a remedy. That's an antidote for isolationism, for being alone and lonely and feeling disconnected and unworthy and aimless. So I'm always going to encourage somebody, as the wise Alfred Adler used to say when he had depressed patients, he would encourage them to get out of themselves and to invest in the lives of other people. What to do when you're depressed? Focus on making a difference for other people. Get involved. There are so many people who are less fortunate, and you can help them. And so, that's one way to invest. It's not the only way. I mean, anything that matters enough to someone. I mentioned, grandchildren, but you can be involved in something like, saving stamps or saving the whales or saving heathens or whatever your thing is. There has to be a purpose and a desire to do something that's positive or makes a difference. Some people are just all about their grandkids, and they will save every penny they have so they can put those grandkids through the best schooling possible, or give them opportunities that they never had themselves. People have to find a why. They have to find reasons. They have to believe in something that matters.
They were talking week before last weekend, I guess, about Tiger Woods and his run at the Masters. He didn't end up getting that far, but that he made it as far as he did this year was kind of
remarkable. Yeah, given his injuries, right?
And they asked one of the other golfers about how did he do this? Was it because he was such a great athlete? And he laughed and he said, no, right now his body is not in great shape. But this is the other golfer talking. He said he had never met anybody who was more passionate about what they were doing in life, that is playing golf, than Tiger Woods was passionate about playing golf, and that was, I guess, his meaning in life.
Mm-hmm.
And we could argue about whether or not a person should have a higher meaning or something, but by having that kind of passion about anything is helpful. A lot of our drivers, they do end up spending a lot of time alone. It's just,
yeah.
And we talked about that early on as being sometimes kind of nice because you don't have to deal with people. And sometimes people don't like dealing with people. But after a while, even the most introverted drivers come to dislike the loneliness that goes with being on the road, sometimes weeks at a time without really having the touch of another person, the interaction with another person. And we talked about that one of the things you have to do is you have to reach out and make some of that happen. Take that extra moment to chat with somebody along the way, along the highway of life here, because that kind of individualism can make a person sick.
Yeah. This is where you usually tell me we're going to have a break.
We're going to have a break. It's time for a break. So we're going to take the break. We'll be back here in just a couple of minutes, wrap things up for this week. You've been listening to TNCRadio.live, Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. Stay tuned right there. We'll be right back.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Team driving with your spouse. Is it for you? Trucking's an exciting career with many opportunities. Although there are many benefits to being a truck driver, such as freedom on the open road and seeing new places, there's still negative sides like loneliness and boredom. Truck driving is also difficult for your marriage. Being away from your spouse for days or weeks at a time makes it challenging to have a happy and healthy marriage. Thankfully, truck drivers have the option to team drive with their spouse. Forming a husband and wife trucking team can be a great opportunity to spend time together and travel the United States while making good money. Now, like any other job, driving with your spouse has pros and cons. Stay with me to find out if team driving with your spouse is right for you. Now, the pros of team driving with your spouse. Faster delivery. Due to the FMCSA's hours of service regulations, truck drivers can only drive up to 11 hours a day. Any driving after 11 hours will result in a penalty and a bad safety score. Truckers on average will drive up to 55-60 miles an hour. After their 11-hour shift, that adds up to a little over 600 miles a day. When you drive with your spouse, you can drive more miles. While you're finishing your 11-hour shift, your spouse can be resting and getting ready for their shift. This allows drivers to complete more miles a day, which in return leads to a faster delivery. You won't feel lonely. Driving alone can lead to developing mental health issues later on in your trucking career. Studies show that depression and anxiety are some of the most common mental health issues in drivers today. Team driving with your spouse eliminates feeling lonely on the road. Having your spouse with you on the road gives you someone to talk to and enjoy your daily activities with. Make more money. A single truck driver makes less money per mile than one whose team drives. Why is that? Well, with two drivers, you're completing more miles each day, and therefore you reach your destination much quicker. Cons of team driving with your spouse. Difficulty getting along. They say that distance makes the heart grow fonder, and that's true. It can be difficult to get along with your spouse when you're in a small space for weeks at a time. You may find yourself wanting alone time to pursue your hobbies and interests. When you decide to team drive, you give up the possibility of any alone time in your truck. Lack of sleep. To make team driving work, your spouse will have to rest while you complete your shift of driving. Sleeping in a truck cab, especially if your spouse is noisy, can be difficult. As a truck driver, it's essential to have a good night's rest before hitting the road. Getting the right amount of sleep is not only good for your overall health, but it also makes you more alert and cautious when driving. Harder to find trucking insurance. If you decide that team driving's for you and your spouse, you might have trouble finding a commercial truck insurance company that'll write your insurance. When you team drive, your truck never stops. Therefore, the truck is at risk for higher exposure to accidents. Your truck's also more liable to having maintenance issues, which can result in getting violations. Conclusion? Driving with your spouse has many pros and cons. Our advice to you is to take a look at the pros and cons and determine if this is the right career path for you and your spouse. Trucking with your spouse can lead to many great memories. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
This is TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back, TNC Radio.live. Tom Kelly here with Dr. Christopher Cortman. This is Building Strong Minds. Dr. Chris, before we jump back to where we were just a moment ago, talking about the isolation and so forth that some drivers face, tell me a little bit about how people can learn more about you, find your books, all that good stuff. How do people find you?
srqshrink.com. You can find me pretty much anywhere from there. And that includes things like TikTok, where they can see my videos, TikTok Shrink. You can always drop me an email at srqshrink@aol.com. Someone said they still have AOL. I said, yeah, I'm one of like 3 guys that they still have an account on AOL. Yeah, they can find me in those ways, and I will always respond. And you can get my books on Amazon, or you can, go to my website, and you can get any of my books from there. So,
okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And on it's TikTok Shrink, also for those who are into the TikTok.
Yeah, which I thought was just teenage girls, but now it's teenage girls and me.
Well,
So
there you go. Yeah. And
no, I have like 100 videos up. They're all mental health minutes. So the most that people have to watch me is like 2 or 3 minutes, and that's all you can do on TikTok. So,
and we play those.
A lot of fun.
We play those here throughout the day too. So
yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
To know you that way as well. So we were talking about a lot of different things in the last segment, not the least of which was we were talking about people who end up in isolation for whatever reason. And I didn't think about that till I said it out loud. But, that's not just drivers. It's also prisoners, people who are ill, and I remember... it was a year ago right now when I was in the hospital for several weeks, and it was kind of at the height of the nervousness around COVID. And so on top of everything else, nobody came to see me, not even the nurses. It's not like they would just drop in and say, hey, how you doing? The only reason they would come in there was because some monitor was beeping, or they had to give me medicine or something, but nobody just dropped by to say hi.
Yeah.
And of course, my family couldn't drop by to say hi. And the only visitor I ended up getting there for, at one point was the pastor to talk about my funeral arrangements. So
this is job description.
Yeah. So, isolation can happen in a lot of different places and a lot of different forms, and can be very, very difficult for the person, especially if they're like me. I'm a social creature, I talk to people, and to not be able to have any discussions with anybody, I could talk to people on the phone, but, that's not the same. It's not the same.
I wanted to make one point on this issue, and sometimes I'll have patients who are very lonely, and I look at them and say, wow, this is an attractive person physically, and I listen to them and I like them, and I think, why in the world would somebody who has these kinds of social skills and this kind of social acumen, why would they still be lonely and not connected? And I'm thinking right now of a woman that I've been working with since her husband died a while back. And she's done a nice job of moving on with her life. She's in her mid to late 60s. Very attractive lady, very nice lady. And, we both agreed, she's ready to love again, to connect again. It's, it's an okay thing. And I noticed time was going by and nothing was happening. And it occurred to me that what she was doing with her life, the activities that she had in her life, they weren't helpful. They were not successful in helping her to meet people of the opposite sex, in her age group, or people that she would be interested in. And one of the conclusions that one can't help but draw in my profession is that if you keep on doing the same things, you're going to keep on getting the same results. And so you could say, I'm just not meeting anyone. And, one day I said, well, why don't we circle this day on the calendar 1 year from now? And let's say it was last February or something. So next February 6th, we'll see if you met anybody by then. And my guess is we'll be circling that date and finding out that you're still alone and lonely because you haven't changed anything in your life. And even though you're wonderful, and even though you're attractive, and even though you've had a successful long-term relationship and you have the skills to do another one, you're still going to be lonely and alone, because if nothing changes, then nothing changes.
Right.
And it was no one any less brilliant than Einstein who said that the definition of insanity, right, was doing the same thing and expecting different results, something like that.
Yeah.
So, over the years, I've had the opportunity to read things about movie stars and their personal lives. And two in particular really made me smile. Sharon Stone and Ashley Judd, two drop-dead gorgeous women, both in separate articles, said, I haven't had a date in over a year. And I thought, well, I would have dated either one of them had they asked me. But the reason they hadn't had a date is because whatever they were doing, it was not giving them the opportunity to meet anybody of interest. And if people that attractive and wealthy and, put together couldn't get a date in over a year, there's a reason for that. And the reason, again, is whatever you're doing right now, you're not meeting anybody. So what's my point? I had to say to this woman, it's time to do something a little different. It's time to get out of your comfort zone. Would you be willing to try, an online dating service? Would you be willing to have somebody fix you up with somebody? Would you be willing to, go to a different church with people in your, whatever? Would you be willing to step out of your comfort zone and do something differently in an effort to start meeting people? And for this particular person, when she finally said yes, she actually agreed to do a blind date that a friend was willing to try. And it took one blind date before she said, I really like this guy. And the guy liked her right away. And, they're off. They're off and running. Now, I'm not saying there's an easy solution to issues like that, but I think if there is a solution, it's sometimes if we want to change in our lives, we have to do something. We have to change something we're doing to get some different results.
Gotcha.
And if our issue here is isolation, we got to do something to get connected with humans. And if our issue is a lack of investment, Tom, then we might have to say, what am I willing to invest in? Am I willing to become an assistant little league coach and start loving on some kids? Am I willing to teach some Sunday school? Am I willing to go down and play the guitar for the seniors at the ALF down the road? I mean, what am I willing to do, to find some meaning, some purpose? Can I go down to the Humane Society and love on some pets? I need to do something differently if there are going to be some things that matter to me. Are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Are you willing to go down to those places and stuff envelopes, make phone calls, go on marches for peace about, the war in Ukraine? What are you willing to do, to start investing in something that matters to you?
And that means taking action. And that's the scary part. And yeah, it might not work the first time.
Right.
It might not. Okay. And so you go, okay, well, that didn't work. So you adjust and you do something a little bit different, but you do something, because I promise sitting at home on watching YouTube videos or just reading a good book or whatever is not going to get you out of your isolation. Hey, we're about out of time. And Dr. Cortman, appreciate you very much. Thank you as always. And we look forward to
great to be here.
Yeah, next week. Let's see. I'm guessing it's a V word. I'm just guessing. Guessing it's a B word.
You know, wherever you went to school, they taught you to spell.
They did well. They did well.
They did.
All right. Hey.
Well, have a great week, guys.
Yeah, coming up next, right?
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 Guys.